Today, we're going to look at the presence and influence of the French in North America. In the 1500s, Spain had already dominated and taken control of Central and much of South America. But by the 1600s, France, under King Louis XIV, will become the most dominant military, political, and cultural influence across Europe and the world. As well, we'll see the emergence in later episodes of the Dutch and the English take their presence in this part of the world. So by the 1500s and up until the 1600s, Spain has already colonized foreign plantations and retrieved much of the natural resources from Central America and South America. And what remains untapped potential is modern-day Canada and much of what is today the United States. France, under Louis XIV, is going to become the most influential country across the world and throughout Europe in the 1600s, where the main royal courts across Europe and all diplomatic treaties and alignments are going to be written in French. There is the quest for a Northwest Passage. Are there sea routes possible to sail over North America to reach Asia? And the goods and natural resources found in modern-day Canada and the U.S. will help supply and finance the French Empire. Particularly what the French are going to find is not gold or silver, but rely on the fur trade, seafood, and lumber to benefit the nation. Early on, the French are going to settle in what is going to be known as Acadia, modern-day New Brunswick and Nova Scotia in Canada, and sailing for river routes, this Northwest Passage. They are going to explore what is today the St. Lawrence Seaway, which flows into the Great Lakes, and from the Great Lakes follow it and pursue it down through the Mississippi River to the end of the Gulf of Mexico at the mouth. Some of the early European explorers who were financed by the French monarchy would be Giovanni da Verrazzano, another Italian, just as Columbus and Amerigo Vespucci were hired by the Spanish. You're going to have Verrazzano hired by the French during the same time period to explore for the King of France. He will arrive in much of that early eastern coastline of North America, and once again, with seafood, with lumber and explorations, Europeans are going to start to come in contact along the eastern shoreline with various native tribes, sometimes enslaving them, sometimes doing trade, all this nearly 100 years before the English presence in North America is fully felt. The first key French explorer of North America is Jacques Cartier. He is going to look for a Northwest Passage, be the first to start to sail down the St. Lawrence River. He will make his way as far as what will be Montreal, an island he will see in the middle of the river and has a giant mountain on this island, so he names it Mount Royal, and will be founded later on by the French. Then, by the early 1600s, nearly 100 years after the Spanish have already been planted throughout much of South America and Central America, the French are going to arrive at a little tiny island in between Maine and New Brunswick called St. Croix. They are going to settle there over the winter, have a camp out, and it will be a very harsh winter as the ice is frozen over and the men are going to be stuck on this island, resulting in nearly half of the men dying through the winter. One of the men in that voyage is Mr. Samuel de Champlain. Mr. Champlain is regarded as the father of New France, or ultimately the father of Canada. Just making one voyage across the Atlantic Ocean would be dangerous and risky enough, and no likelihood or guarantee that you would survive. Mr. Champlain would do it nearly 30 times during his lifetime, and ultimately founding the very first French settlements in Canada and establishing what would be an early cultural center of French life in Canada of modern-day Quebec, on another island found along the St. Lawrence River. It will just be founded the year following the English in Virginia of Jamestown. Ultimately, Montreal will go on to become the capital of French Canada, and various other explorers will continue to pursue all the way into the Great Lakes, like a Jean Nicolet, who will name a Green Bay in Wisconsin, and then there will be a Father Marquette, a French priest, who along with Mr. Nicolet will continue to explore through the Mississippi River and reach as far as what is modern-day St. Louis. interact with local native tribes, and pass away from disease though while there in Michigan. Following these early expeditions of the French, already near the midwestern part of the United States, through which many of these universities and cities and towns are named after in their honor, the final explorer will be Mr. René Cavelier de la Salle, and he will be the first European that is known to have fully sailed the entire length of the Mississippi River from the Great Lakes down to the mouth in the Gulf of Mexico, and he will name it in honor of the King of France, Louisiana. So as a result, the French are going to continue to explore much of the Great Lakes region, settle predominantly in what is Canada, and found various cities like St. Louis and Detroit, or Detroit, Michigan. Some of the various vessels that were actually sailed at the time have been recovered and found under the seafloors of the St. Lawrence River and at the mouth of the Mississippi River in the Gulf of Mexico. There would be a rich tradition of French culture found in various settlements that are modern day Biloxi, Mobile, New Orleans, that still have a lot of that French culture, some dialects, as well as traditions like Carnival that are celebrated. What the French would find and benefit mostly while in Canada in North America is the fur trade. That many times there were generally good trade relations with the Native American tribes, particularly those in the Iroquois Confederacy, for the exchange of animal furs, particularly beaver. Why beaver and otters and minks were of high value is back in Europe at the time, their oily fur and skin was being used to make a more waterproof resistant hats and the fashion of the time for men back in Europe. And so it was a very high commodity which the French were able to profit from and allow their settlements in the New World to survive. Over the course of hundreds of years, the French would establish various ports and trading posts along the rivers in Canada in exchange with various Native American tribes. Some of them still exist to this day, such as Grand Portage in upper Minnesota, and those times to think of what it must have been like to be a few settlers living at the edges of the world and just waiting for the next boat to arrive, either with news from back in Europe or the new arrival of shipments of animal furs to be weighed, traded, and exchanged with various tribes and other explorers. There would be others such as Michilimackinac in Lake Michigan and between what is today Canada and the United States. As well, you would have of Detroit, Michigan, one of these early cities that would be founded and going to become one of the largest, still holding that significance to its French roots. In time, though, by the 1750s, nearly 150 plus years of explorations and settlements across what is today Canada and along the Mississippi River, there would eventually come tensions between the boundaries of the French lands and the British colonies. But that will be looked at another time as we continue to examine the influence various European countries had in what is today the United States.